The question today is, should you take your ex back after a divorce? In my case, that option isn't actually on the table right now, but if it were, I'm going to walk you through all of the steps I would take to deal with that question in my life. Hi, my name is Jeff Campbell. I'm from DivorcedParentsClub.com, and I have 3 kids and unfortunately am towards the end of a fairly amicable divorce right now. So the question again is, should you take them back if they come to you and they say, I've made a horrible mistake, please take me back? What would you do? And first, let's look at the percentage of couples who divorce and actually do get back together again. And the actual number of couples that do that is between 10 and 15%. So the odds are not really in your favor if you're hoping for that. But upwards of 15% do remarry, and so it is definitely possible. The next question I have is, who regrets a divorce more, a man or a woman? And as we probably know, more women file for divorce than men, and that was true in my case. My wife, she didn't file for divorce, but she asked for a divorce, and it came to me completely out of the blue. I was not expecting that. Our marriage wasn't perfect by any means, but I thought it was pretty good, and her request for a divorce completely shocked me. But that's not surprising and that's not unusual. We'll talk about that a little bit more a little bit later in the video. But 27% of women end up regretting a divorce compared to 39% of men. So if you're like me, guys, don't sweat it. Upwards of 40% of guys end up regretting getting divorced, and I'm feeling that as well. I didn't see it coming. It wasn't my idea. I've adjusted to it at this point 10 months later, but it's still not what I wanted, and it's not what I wanted for my kids. It's not what I wanted for my life, but here we are dealing with it. So are people happier after they get divorced? We know that 39% of guys regret it and 27% of women regret it, but most adults, whether they regret it or not, are actually less happy after a divorce. That's just the truth. And the reality of it is, you know, when you're together, even if there's only one primary breadwinner, you've still got a team of 2 people working together, in theory, on the family and the income and the operation of the house and the paying the bills. And when you divorce, obviously, you've got 2 separate sets of those things happening. Not necessarily 2 separate sets of kids, but 2 abodes, 2 sets of bills, all of that kind of stuff. And that's a lot more challenging for one person. I know right now my wife, I still call her my wife because the ink isn't dry on the divorce decree yet, but I know she's struggling with what she calls adulting because she hasn't really ever had to do that before. I did most of that in our marriage, and she's struggling to kind of find her way on that. And she'll continue to struggle to find her way on that for a while. And she has a new boyfriend, so I'm sure she's in that bliss stage of the new relationship, the new relationship smell and all. But eventually that's going to wear off, and the reality is going to set in that she doesn't have a partner in the way that she did with me. And the new guy's never going to contribute in that regard unless they get married. But that's it for a different video. So what are the signs that your ex wants you back? Well, the first one you're going to see, and I have actually seen this a couple of times, is jealousy. I had an ex-girlfriend who started following me on Instagram out of the blue after my wife asked for a divorce, but before we'd really done anything about it. She just started following me, so I followed her back. I hadn't seen her in 15 years, and I happened to like a picture from Halloween of her and her kids and her husband. And somehow my wife saw that. She must have been stalking her Instagram page for some reason, and she flew off the handle. Now, why would she fly off the handle? She had already asked for a divorce, and I liked a picture of her with her kids and her husband. She wasn't wearing lingerie or anything like that. To me, it was insane. But it was the first of probably 2 or 3 signs of jealousy that I've seen over the last 10 months. I'm not reading into that. I don't think she wants me back necessarily, but I did see that sign, and that is one sign that your ex possibly wants you back. The next one is that they dwell and they talk a lot about the good times that you've had together. I don't care how bad your marriage was, chances are you had a lot of good times, good vacations, trips, memories, things you did with the kids, things you did with each other. And if they talk a lot about that, that's a really good sign that they're reminiscing and maybe starting to regret their decision. The next one is she starts to follow you on social media, or if she never stopped following you, but she starts to like and comment and things like that on your social media. That's a really good sign also, because it shows she's kind of paying attention. Maybe she's on there looking to see if there are pictures of you with new men or women, depending on whether or not you're a man or a woman and what your sexual preference is. But maybe she's checking you out. Maybe she's doing a little cyber stalking. That's a good sign. Again, any one of these things, I wouldn't read too much into it, but if you're starting to see multiple signs, that is a good sign that she wants you back. The next one is they start to confide in you about their feelings and sharing things with you. And that tells you that they feel safe around you. And that's a really good sign. When someone wants a divorce, you know, maybe they're having an affair, maybe they don't feel safe anymore, maybe they don't feel a connection with you. So if they're starting to confide in you about things, that struggles and challenges, and you're there just listening, especially guys, if you're listening without trying to fix it, which is what our tendency is, that's a really good sign that she trusts you enough to really open up. That's a good sign. And it could be a sign that she's reconsidering. The last one I'm going to talk about is that they reach out to you more than you do them. Assuming you've gone your separate ways, you're living in different places and all that, you know, you obviously have some things you have to connect with about. But if they're connecting with you about things unrelated to what I would call business items, you know, bills, kids, etc. If they're talking to you about, you know, oh, I went to this amazing restaurant last week, you would love it, I wish you were there, you know, if they're saying things like that, that's a really good sign that maybe they're reconsidering. And especially if they're doing more of that to you than you are to them. And I would encourage you to let that happen. If they're the one that left, don't reach out to them more than they reach out to you. Match and mirror their behavior, as Coach Corey Wayne, a guy that I follow on YouTube, likes to say. Match and mirror their behavior. If they take an hour to respond to your texts every time you send one, respond an hour later when they text you back. Match and mirror their behavior. Don't go way overboard compared to what they're doing with you. Otherwise, it could kind of send the signal that you're kind of needy and desperate. And that's definitely not an attractive quality and definitely not going to get them to want to come back with you. The next question, and really the most important question, is it a good idea to date or reconcile with your ex, either completely after you're divorced or maybe during the divorce process? So I'm going to suggest, if this question comes up for you, if your ex comes to you and says, you know, hey, can we hang out? Do you want to reconcile? I'm going to assume for the moment that you're a guy watching this in my same situation. Your wife or girlfriend left you. And chances are, if they come back to you, they're not going to want to just jump right back into a full-fledged relationship or marriage necessarily. They're going to want to take it slow. They're going to want to dip their toes in the water first and make sure that everything feels right, it feels safe, that it's comfortable. So I'm going to encourage you to not push for anything if they come back to you. Just date like you did at the very beginning of your relationship. Don't feel pressure and don't put pressure on them to label where you're at. If they still have somebody that they're dating, don't push for them to end that. I know it sucks. In my case, my wife, we're not divorced yet, and she does have a boyfriend, and it's a guy she's been friends with for years that I always saw as a potential cock blocker, and it sucks. But if she were to come to me and said, you know, hey, can we hang out sometimes? And, you know, I'm not going to push for her to end things with him. The more pressure I put on her, the more she's likely to run in the opposite direction. So don't put pressure, don't label it. Just let things happen. Let it progress naturally. And when she's ready to take things to the next level, she will definitely let you know. Don't push for it, don't ask for it. Let her come to you as if it was her idea. Then I would also ask, have you actually worked on yourself, and has she worked on herself? You likely both brought baggage into the relationship at the beginning. I know my wife and I did. We both had tons of childhood baggage from our own childhoods. My attachment style tends to be anxious. Hers tended to be avoidant. Those are commonly attachment styles that do come together, but they obviously, for obvious reasons, you know, they do clash, you know. I tended to be a little bit too needy. She tended to be a little bit too standoffish. And so I felt like my needs weren't being met and she felt smothered. And I'm generalizing and I'm kind of summarizing very quickly, but that's not uncommon. So have you worked on yourselves? Ever since she said she wanted a divorce, I started seeing a therapist, and I still see a therapist. And my therapist has asked me this question before. Hey, if she said she wanted to try and fix things or work on things, what would you do? My answer to him was exactly what I'm telling you in this video. If she came to me right now and said, hey, I want to stop the divorce and I just want to go back to being married, I wouldn't just blanketedly say yes, because I don't want things to go back to the way they were. I didn't see the problems in the moment when she said she wanted a divorce, but in retrospect, I can totally see a lot of different issues that we had, that we were both bringing to the marriage and to the family as a whole. And I would want to make sure that those things had been addressed so that moving forward, our marriage was better than ever. And so I wouldn't just blanketedly say yes. I would want some assurances from her, and we would have to do a lot of talking and again, taking things slowly. So making sure that you and her have done some sort of work on yourselves. It doesn't have to be traditional psychotherapy, but that's a great place to start. Then think about your old issues. Think about what it was that drove a wedge between the two of you. You know, were you too clingy and needy, or had you become too complacent in your marriage and you were taking her for granted? I know I did some of that in my marriage. Think about those things and why would they be different this time around? What would change? And obviously I talked about therapy and doing work on yourself to kind of nudge you in the right directions, but think about the issues that had been there and what would make them not be there if you tried again. Because you don't want to necessarily just go back to being, mediocre in your marriage. You want things to go to the next level and be better than they ever were. The next question, and this is a biggie, is why would you consider saying yes if they asked you back? I know if you're like me, you've got kids, you've got a family, you've got a house, and you envisioned growing old together in that house and all that. But that in and of itself isn't a good enough reason to reconcile. There's got to be something there. A lot of us feel lonely. That's, if I'm being honest here, that's probably what drove my wife into the arms of her friend, before we were even done with our divorce. And I used to do this too. I had a tendency to jump right from one relationship into the next, and that's not healthy. It's not good. You need to take time to heal yourself before you're ready to love again. And when you jump from one right into the other, or if you jump right from this point back into your relationship with your soon-to-be ex or your ex, without doing any work on yourselves and without figuring out why it's going to be different this time around, there's a really good chance it's going to go south again. So really identify your reason for wanting to reconcile and make sure that that's a good reason, not just, that you're lonely or whatever. And then what's going to make it better this time around? I know we talked about a little bit about therapy, but really think about, sit down with them and say, okay, well, what was our problem in our marriage? And in my case, it revolved around communication. I had become complacent. I had started to take her for granted. She can be defensive and a little micromanaging. And we would need to sit down together and say, okay, well, how do I get my needs met without being needy and clingy? And how can you communicate without it coming across defensively? And what are we going to do to work on those things to make our marriage really and truly better than it ever was before? I'm confident we could actually do those things if she wanted to. I don't think she does, but if she does, I'll make another video about that. But for now, that's where I'm going to leave it with you. What would you do if your ex came to you and said, hey, I want to fix this, I want to reconcile, I want to undo what we've done? Leave me a comment down below. Also leave me comments down below about questions you have, because I'll answer those in future videos. Thanks for being here.